Hi, I'm Julian Glover, an actor, and I'm speaking to you on Cracking the Code of Spy Movies to Dan and Tom. So let's get off and have a chat.
All right, today we're thrilled to have with us a tremendous stage, big screen, and television actor who starred in For Your Eyes Only as Kristatos and has also been in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade and Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and tons of other movies and TV shows. And he's got a brand new book out on his career called Q to Q. So join us now as we're talking with Julian Glover. First of all, a big thank you, Julian, for joining us today. It is indeed a true honor to speak with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have quite an acting career, and today we want to touch on a lot of what you've accomplished, and especially talk about your James Bond movie experience playing Kristatos in For Your Eyes Only, some of your other big roles, and your new book about your career, Q to Q, as we mentioned. So, You've done so much, making hundreds of appearances in movies and TV shows. Tell us how you got your first acting gig, and when you decided that, yeah, acting is going to be my career.
Well, I started off at school, actually. I had no idea that I was going to be an actor. I wanted to be an archaeologist. But Fortunately, I didn't go to that because my maths is not good enough and you have to pass examinations for that. Anyway, I was at school, and it was a school which was founded by one of William Shakespeare's great actors in South London, School for Poor Boys, which he founded late in life when he'd made a lot of money. And this school still exists. In fact, my granddaughter's at it now. And it had a tradition of doing Shakespeare plays every summer, but this tradition had gotten lost and forgotten about until a young English master came to the school, almost fresh from Oxford, and decided to revive it. And he decided to revive it with an open-air modern dress production of Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare. And I'd never done any acting before, but I was never thought. I was rather a shy little boy, if you can imagine. And because I was rather good at reading out loud, which I did a lot of with my baby brother, who needed to be read to at bedtime. Well, anyway, I was quite good at it. I was asked to play the part of Mark Antony, which many of your viewers will know. It was one of the most flamboyant and wonderful parts that Shakespeare ever wrote. Wonderful part to start off with, and I was terrified, had no idea what to do with it. But fortunately, this young teacher was very talented and went on to found the National Youth Theatre in this country, which still flourishes. Anyway, he took me on to do that, and he coached me, and we did it, and it was a success. And I got the taste of it then. It wasn't until the next term we did a thing called a Gilbert and Sullivan opera. I don't know if you know about those in America. They were very turn of the 19th century into the 20th century, very light operas. And there's one called Iolanthe, which has a character who has a patter song. One of those Danny Kaye numbers. And I did that, and I came home, and I felt that I'd experienced what I don't think I'd ever sensed before, which was a sense of holding the audience in the palm of my hand, which I sort of did on that occasion. I think there were a lot of parents around daring Julian Glover to do it, and Julian Glover did it. And I went home and said, now we get serious. I said, I'm not messing around. I'm not being a silly 15-year-old schoolboy. I want to do this for the rest of my life.
Wow.
And fortunately, I had parents who were both writers, and they, instead of thinking, oh my God, our son is going to be an actor, what a terrible life, etc., which is a lot of people's reactions, they decided that it was quite a good idea that their son had an idea of what he wanted to do. Because so often, as you know, I don't know about you two, but the decision is not often not made till much, much later. Anyway, I just knew then. I just knew I had to do it. Whether I was going to be any good, I didn't know. But I'd had that taste, and two tastes with two very contrasting roles.
Yeah.
And so I decided I was going to be. So they encouraged me. And when I left school, I went to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art and became an actor.
That's fantastic.
And here I am.
Yeah. That's fantastic. And great to have the support of your parents on that. Because like you said, sometimes it's like, oh no. That's
Yeah,
terrific.
parents, yeah, they are very. I mean, even now we say, with my grandchildren, I do hope they're not going to be actors. But then you say, why do I hope they're not going to be actors? I'm one, and I like being one. And I've just gone to RADA, Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. Then I started off being an actor, and very soon, within about 18 months, got myself into the Royal Shakespeare Company. Wasn't called that then. Just called the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre in Stratford-on-Avon. And I stayed there for 3 years, learning my Shakespeare and learning from fantastically good actors who were there, wonderful leading actors, and came out at the end of that an absolute Shakespeare freak, which is what I am now and what I have been since then.
That's great.
And off I went into the business.
Well, and being a Shakespeare freak got you a Laurence Olivier Award, right? Because you played Henry IV in parts 1 and part 2.
Yes, I did.
Right? And I saw that they did that here in Chicago in 2006 at the Chicago Shakespeare Theater, and then brought it to Stratford-upon-Avon after they did the run here in Chicago. The person who did it here was fine, but I would have loved to have seen you in that role.
You brought it to Stratford.
Yes, it came from Chicago Shakespeare Theater. They did it.
I was asked to play there once, and I couldn't do it.
Yeah,
it was really sad. Very nice woman who runs it.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I got the award for that. Yes, I did. And
That's
I've been
awesome.
nominated for 2 other parts for those Olivier Awards, and I lost them off to other people. So I've had 1 success and 2 failures in that area.
Hey, you were nominated. That's a success.
Yeah.
Well, in itself, I suppose it is. Yes. One was
Absolutely.
Colossal Phidias in Coriolanus, and the other was for Friar Lawrence in Romeo and Juliet.
Okay.
I didn't get those, but that's all right. I now have an Olivier Award up on my wall, and I'm very pleased with it.
That's awesome. Now, for the U.S. audience who may not know, the Olivier's similar to a Tony on Broadway. So that's a big accomplishment. So congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Now, you do all of this stage work, and I heard a Broadway star here who took a TV show, and her comment on it was, I took the TV show so I could make enough money to come back and live on Broadway and do Broadway shows, which is my passion, but I couldn't make money on Broadway. Is it similar in the UK?
Well, I was never in a position of making much money anyway. I've never been in a position where I can pick and choose, really, or very rarely been in that position. Your leading players could choose what they were going to do. Now I will do a long season at Stratford, Ontario, or I would like to go down to, I don't know, wherever they're doing a Shakespeare festival. I will do that this year. Next year, I will do a couple of television series. I've never been able to do that. I've had to take the work that comes.
Okay.
And some of it's been absolutely wonderful, and some of it's been catastrophic. And,
That's probably how it mostly is.
particularly for me. But here I am still chuntering around.
That's awesome.
Terrific.
Can't all be bad.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Here at Spy Movie Navigator, of course, we focus on spy movies, and our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies, which are on now. That's what we do. So please tell us how you got your role of Kristatos, now that we're talking about getting parts and stuff, in For Your Eyes Only, because we think you were brilliant in the movie and helped make For Your Eyes Only one of the best Roger Moore outings as James Bond. So how did you get that?
You to put some of that towards me.
Yes.
I thought what was terrific about that movie was that they decided to abandon all the magic. Press a button and that building will blow up, or whatever, or have a hook on your hand, or a magic thing you throw across the room and it knocks people out, or even cats on your lap, or anything like that. The at the beginning, the two villains, one turns not to be a villain, are ordinary people in understandable walks of life, businessmen, and me and Topol, and that's what I thought. And in the film, Bond had to do everything better than everybody else. He didn't have any magic powers. He was just bloody good at everything. He could ski better. He could jump better. He could drive better. He could do all those things better than anyone else. And that made him into, for me, a much more interesting character. He's just bloody good at everything.
Yes.
And that made him, into, for my money, a believable Bond figure. And that's why I so enjoyed doing that with darling Mr. Moore as well, who was one of nature's gentlemen, and
yes,
one of the most delightful people I've ever known in my life. That made it a very good film to do, and I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah. So how did you get it? How did you get the job? How did you get a call?
I'm trying to think of it. Well, okay, you've got me for an hour. I'll tell you.
Okay.
I'd just been through a very, very bad patch, and I hadn't worked for about 6 months, and we were in the business of how much do you think that we could get on the house, and of course the car will have to go, and all that. We were on the edge of that when suddenly I was rung up and said, there's a film happening in a couple of weeks in Greece, as a Roman film starring Anthony Hopkins. Your part's not brilliant, but it's okay. And the money is not good, but it's understandable. And for my money, any money at that point was valuable. So I got that. And one day before I went out to do it, there was the Screen Actors Guild strike in America. Mm-hmm. And all American shows were stopped at that moment because of Screen Actors, and so there I was out of work again. The next day, which was a Friday, my agent rang and said, go in and see them for a job tomorrow morning. I said, what, Saturday? No jobs happen on Saturday. He said, well, this one is. Go in. And they were doing a thing about Alexander the Great in Corfu in Greece, and they wanted me to play his father, which was a very nice thing to do. But it wasn't anything of a film, but it was something to do. So I did that, and that was a 4-week shoot, and I was in the middle of that shoot when I got another call from my agent saying they're interested in you for a Bond film, and they want you to come over for Sunday. And I said, I can't do that. I'm actually shooting on the Saturday, and it won't be possible. And my agent said, Julian, listen to me. We're talking about a Bond film. Pull your finger out. Do something about it. So I thought, oh, yes, I better do that. So I went to the first assistant, and he was wonderful. He said, well, I know we can shift the scenes, and And I got a plane out on the Saturday afternoon, still in my costume and makeup. Had to change on the plane. And it was a plane with propellers on the front, so it took me to Frankfurt and then to Barcelona, and then another plane from Barcelona to London. Anyway, I'd ended up seeing Cubby Broccoli, you know who he is, the governor of the Bond films, and everybody was there. All the makeup people, everybody was there, who were in a position to see if I was all right. And I've been told, I used to smoke in those days, don't smoke, because he doesn't like it. Oh, well, I haven't smoked for 35 years now, so that's all right. So I didn't smoke. And at one point, Cubby went off with his wife, Dana, into another room, and the costume bloke said, "You've got it, Julian. I can tell Dana likes you." And that was the case. And they gave me the part on the spot, and I went home. I went back to Greece that night on the Sunday night, and the next day I was shooting again in the morning. And of course, I bought dinner for the first assistant and drinks for the whole unit, because I wanted to be the villain in a Bond film. And another convenience of it was that we started filming in Corfu. Yes, indeed, Corfu, which was a 20-minute hop from where we were on the Gulf of Corinth, and I arrived to get my first per diems, which was about £500, and I went from one world to another, and it's one example of so many in our business of how our life can change almost overnight. Having a terrible time being out of work and then going to a Bond film. I'm really lucky.
That's a great story. That's a great story. Now, you mentioned Roger Moore, of course. How was it working with Roger Moore? Of course, you worked with him a couple of times in the 60s and on The Saint in a couple of episodes, The Lawless Lady in 64.
I did indeed. I did a Randall and Hopkirk.
Yeah.
Okay. And, we by which time we sort of got to know each other quite well, and he would come and see me in the theatre quite often and things like that. So when I got that part of that film, I think we were both well pleased. He used to call me Mr. National Theatre, and I was a lardy actor who did posh things, and and he was merciless in his teasing me on that score.
I bet,
but absolutely delightful. I mean, he was so amusing and so hyper intelligent. He knew exactly what to do at any one point, whether it was on the screen or off the screen. If we got to an awkward moment when the extras were being difficult or something like that, he had a wonderful way of cutting through it and bringing everybody back to the front, which he did in conversation. He was one of those people who you really did feel you were the only person in the room when he was talking to you. Because I think at that point, you were the only person in the room he was talking to. Because he was so involved with people. He was so interested in people. He said, I can't act for toffee, but I can talk. Which was absolutely, but of course he could act for toffee.
Yes.
Everyone said he was a nice guy. That's great.
After Connery, he was the Bond I would like to see. I would like to see. Yeah. Although the whole franchise has changed now so much with Daniel, and he was so brilliant. He brought a completely new element to the Bond films. But I still, and I admired them very much, the Bond films he was in. But the older ones, it's because I'm old, I suppose, but they seem to be more fun. And I think that's what Bond films are supposed to do. Mind you, what do I know? They're being fun for millions of people still.
It's always good to see from your perspective because you're in one. You were in one. And so you talked a little bit about Ian and Cubby and Dana and so on. How was it working for Ian Productions?
Well, the minute you went on the set, you saw why these films, the bed on which the films sit is such a luxuriant one, by which I mean there's quite enough money there. Everything is as comfortable as possible for everybody. As you know, you can see the money on the screen.
Yes.
They are so lavishly produced. Cubby was like that himself. He was a very, very generous man, and generous with himself, and his wife was a delightful woman. Did you ever meet her? Absolutely delightful woman, and his daughter, of course, Barbara, who is now, as we know, co-producer. All that bunch of people were really cared about. Well, they seemed to. Maybe they were acting it, but it was the same effect. They cared about everybody who worked with them, and it was with them, not for them. That's the feeling you got all the time.
That's nice.
Which made my entrance into. But mind you, I did know that the first day would be an audition. In those days before you could see what you'd shot immediately, which you can do now. Of course, the minute you do it, they should go into a little huddle and look at it and see if it was all right. In those days, rushes had to go back to London and be printed up, and you didn't get them back until the next evening. And I knew that I was on audition for that 24 hours, 36 hours. Thank goodness I passed. It was all the stuff on the boat that I did, which was the very beginning of the film. We filmed that, and thank God I passed the audition. So that's why I remained in the film.
We're happy about that.
That's fantastic. There's always when you're filming, you say Roger was calming, had that calming effect on everyone, and so on. Are there any behind the scenes stories that you can share with us? There always seems to be something funny that went on, or something most people wouldn't know about, but you would know about because you were there and filming.
There was one I spoke earlier about Roger being able to ease the whole thing out of a quandary, if there was one. It was one evening we were shooting in Corfu, an open air restaurant scene, very posh restaurant, and as it would be in a Bond film, of course. And the local posh people thought how lovely it was to have doing a Bond film. What fun it would be to go in and be an extra and be there with Roger Moore. And so a lot of them came along to be extras in this scene. Well, they didn't know what it's like filming. By 2:00 in the morning, they were starting to drift away. They were so bored, and but you know what filming is, and their attention of people who stayed was flagging, or they'd move tables, which you can't have. You had to be brought back, and it was starting to be quite a problem. And Roger realized this. Okay. It was, as I say, it was a dinner scene, and food was brought to us, and almost at the beginning of the scene, we were served this food, and it was Preverser prawns, I remember, which are very posh. And on came the waiter like this, little mustachioed waiter, black hair, and tipped the whole lot by accident into my lap. And it was horrible. It was all over, everything, right here, right down. And there was appalling silence fell. And at that point, the waiter pulled off a black wig, pulled off a moustache, and it was Roger Moore's wife, Louisa. And Roger had set the whole thing up with the costume department, saying, can we do this? Do you have a spare? And all that stuff, which of course they did. And everybody was set up for it, except me. That's
a great story.
I had no idea it was going to happen. So at that moment, everybody roared with laughter. And we all laughed. I said, I've got to go get changed. Everybody concentrated for the rest of the night. Which was a typical Roger thing. Roger used to play backgammon with Cubby Broccoli.
Yeah,
they played it all the time off stage. Maybe you know this. And at the end of that film, they never paid it, of course. At the end of that film, Roger was owed £1.5 million by Cubby Broccoli. Backgammon. But I don't think it was ever paid.
No, probably not. And how about John Glenn? How was it working with John Glenn and his method?
John Glenn, is a film man through and through. He's a solid crew man, and he really did learn all the way from the bottom right up. And it was wonderful that he got that film, that he was given that film to do. And he was very straight, funny. He's funny. But not jokey. He loves tricks and people being amusing on set, but then has a very good way of saying, "Okay, stop. No, we'll get on with it." Had an unerring eye for the right picture. When I saw the film, I was very impressed by the way he set up scenes, the balances and the angles and things. I was very impressed by that indeed, and he was. Because we'd been cast, he took us for granted and hardly interfered at all, except in matters of moves and things like that. Or if you got the line completely wrong, you completely misunderstood it, he would gently get the continuity girl to come over and say, actually, got that wrong. that could happen, but not very often. He was absolutely delightful. I know people do this, on these interviews. They talk about their colleagues as if they're all wonderful people, very sort of theaterish like, but they really were lovely people on that film. In fact, to take a little coda, a little bracket, most people in our business are. There are some absolute bastards too, but then there are in every business. But generally speaking, the theatrical profession is a very generous, intelligent, and caring profession. It leaps always to the front when there are disasters happen, money raising and things like that, and charities and all that. I have to say that in defense of theatre people. By theatre, I mean, the whole gamut of entertainment, dancers and singers as well, of course. And I've felt that for a long time, and so I'm glad of having the opportunity. Don't cut it out to say it again. Right. And John was a cracker, and still is a cracker. That's his mom.
Yes.
Have you talked to him recently?
No, we want to get him on the show. I think we're going to try to do that.
I'll get him. He loves it. He loves doing this.
Oh, okay.
Good.
Fantastic. We'll tell him we talked to you.
Yeah, well, give him my love, please.
Yes, we will.
All right.
Yeah, so I wanted to just one thing about For Your Eyes Only and your character of Kristatos. When you had me nailed, when I'm like, okay, this guy's going to be good in this. There's the scene where you're outdoors and you meet Bond, and BB's skating, and she starts doing this spin, and you see her spinning, and it says, "The day she wins the gold medal." Then they cut to you, and you say, "Will be the greatest of my life." I could tell you were a stage actor.
The day she wins the gold medal will be the greatest in my life.
The expression on your face, that line was just, you seemed so proud of her, and you just totally nailed me into, I like this guy.
Well, how lovely. I like you for saying it.
Well, it was, when I watched it, it was just like, wow, that was really good. So I'm going to like him in this role.
Well, because my anxiety, of course, not anxiety, my concern was to make him seem as normal as possible at all times. And indeed, he was normal in that he was devoting his life to this girl, but he wasn't sexually assaulting her or anything like that. He was promoting her. And to see and hear someone else say what a wonderful skater she was really brought tears to my eyes. And because I knew she was a good one. And
it's a beautiful scene, brilliant scene. You're terrific and everything. I'm going to talk about another scene when you're on the boat too. But one of our listeners who lives in the UK, Pietro Rossi, wanted us to ask you this question. So we told him we would. All right. He said 2 years before you played Kristatos, you played Count Scarleone in the Tom Baker Doctor Who story. And Scarleone, he said, felt like a prototype Bond villain. Was that like a building block for your Bond villain that you became in Kristatos?
No, it was a building block for me being tested for Bond. This is true. About half a dozen of us, I think, tested for Bond. Our hearts weren't really in it because we knew that Roger had just come out of The Saint, and he was a living representation of what Bond should be. So we weren't very, very hopeful. But to add to that, I was simply appalling in my test. Simply appalling. Didn't get anywhere near him. And a disgraceful exhibition of bad acting. So I wasn't surprised I didn't get it. But I think it was Count Scarleone in that story, that particular story, which was a very good Bond story. It's a sort of, they talk about it as being one of the classics of the Bond stories. My character was a character who came into the world at the very beginning of it and went on through until now, because he was from an alien country, an alien planet, and he'd come over to see, because his planet was collapsing, to see what this one was like. So I was different characters all the way through history. And one of them was Count Scarleone, who was this very, very beautifully dressed, gorgeous wife, cigarette smoker, long cigarette holders and champagne, and that's that sort of chap. And I'm not surprised they wanted to test me for Bond, but as I say, I was appalling. So that's the answer to your friend, the questioner.
Yeah, that's true. That's
great.
Now we had another listener, Scott Winthrop. He asked a question. Maybe you touch on this a little bit about BB. He said, "What the heck was your deal with BB?" I think he's like, "What was your relationship with her in the script and in the movie, and what you interpreted to be your relationship with her in that?"
Well, I decided that he had an unpleasant streak in him. But I defend him. He did fight in the resistance during the war, and he'd given a lot of his time and effort to doing that, and now he was putting time and effort into training up a skater, and obviously he saw great promise in her, and he was quite right to do so because she had great promise, and he was devoting his life to that. He got unpleasant when things went wrong. That's when you saw his deep down true nature. But I've always defended him as being an ordinary person like you and me, who, when things went wrong, also he went to the wrong place to try and get money. And that was a mistake, rather like in Indiana Jones. He went to the Nazis. Indiana Jones, he went to the Nazis, which was a very silly thing to do. And Kristatos is the same thing. He was fighting for the wrong. Anyway, you know the story. I didn't decide. It wasn't in the script that he had any sexual relationship with BB. He was simply he was a beneficent person who was backing this girl for the Olympics. And had the story gone on for years and years, I bet she would have won the Olympics.
Yeah. All right. That's good. That's a great answer. Great answer.
Yep.
All right, now we know you were in another one of our favorite movies, The Fourth Protocol, with Michael Caine, and of course a future James Bond, Pierce Brosnan. You played Brian Harcourt-Smith, the acting director general of the security service. Your meeting with Michael Caine is a fabulous scene. I mean, it's just terrific, and both you and Caine are just absolutely tremendous in this scene. You are perfection in this critical shot. And what was your recollection of that experience? Because really, that scene in the movie, that makes the rest of the movie. It sets us up for the rest of the movie. And you were awesome.
Well, I have to thank you. That's very kind of you. When people said, "What are you playing in this film?" I would say, well, I'm the obligatory arsehole at the Home Office who's the only person in Western Europe who doesn't know that our hero is right.
There you go. Pretty much sums up the movie.
I'm inclined to play those parts. The same in Quatermass and the Pit. It's absolute bloody idiot character. All I really remember, I don't remember. I remember one scene shooting and not the one with Michael.
Okay.
And I remember having a wonderful lunch with Michael out in Windsor. We filmed in Windsor at one point and had a wonderful lunch with him. And that's all I can remember about the time in Windsor or anything about the film at all, except what I've told you. I wasn't on it for very long, I have to say.
Yeah, but you were great.
Hardly a large part, was it? But I was very pleased to do it because it was my first proper introduction to Michael. And of course, he, as you must know, he's a truly delightful man. Very bright, very, very funny. Very funny.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Of course, we know you had roles in Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, which we'll talk about in a second. But we have another question from one of our listeners, Justin Dutko. And he wants to ask you, how does it feel to have been in 3 of the biggest movie franchises in the last 60 years?
And one of the biggest TV franchises, too, with Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Yes, well, haven't I been lucky? I mean, I really do mean that, and I say this all the time. I have been terribly lucky. I've never been a star with all that brings, the money, but also the anxieties and the responsibilities and the, not that my work has been without responsibilities. It has had, but a big star has trouble in restaurants. I remember being in a restaurant with Charlton Heston, and I told the people in the restaurant before I came, I'm bringing Charlton Heston down here, and it was a theatre restaurant. They knew all about actors, and I said, please, make sure he's not bothered. And we sat downstairs at a table in the corner with his back to the audience, to the rest of the restaurant. And the first person to ask for his autograph was one of the waiters.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
And he was wonderfully generous. He was very good about it all. But that's the sort of thing these big stars have to do, and I have to put up with. I lived right next door to Robert Patterson. Literally, I'm pointing at his house now.
Okay.
Where sadly his father's just died. Anyway, and he has trouble all the time. There's always people knocking around here, although he doesn't live here anymore. Young women sitting on the wall wishing Robert Pattinson would come out. And we say, no, he's in California. Oh, well, I'll just sit here for a bit longer. The big stars have that, and I've never had that, but I've been in continual work of some kind, which has been really, really lucky for me. Getting the Bond film was, I suppose that was straight on. Nobody was talking for me or anything. It happened to, Dana saw me in a television show. I'm not sure it wasn't the one you mentioned, the Doctor Who. And she recommended me, and that's why I went to see them. But the Star Wars, in the house that Robert Pattinson family lives in now, was the executive producer on Star Wars. And we were in the garden one afternoon talking over the fence like you do with your neighbor. I just knew he was a great friend, and I knew he was a producer. And I said, what are you up to now? And he said, I'm doing the second Star Wars. I said, oh, he said, do you want to be in it? I said, what? You want to be in it? I said, yes, I'd love it. And he said, well, there's this part, which is not very large, but it's rather important, if you'd like to come and do it. So that was pure nepotism. Yeah. And even when I went on to do Indiana Jones, it wasn't a conversation over the fence again, but he put me up for Indiana Jones, but he put me up for the Nazi colonel, wonderful actor, Michael Byrne played it. And I came away having not got that part. I hadn't got the part, so that happens all the time. Yeah. And so I put it behind me. My agent rang and said they're interested in you for Walter Donovan. I couldn't believe it. And I went in and did a thing called an American accent. It was terribly vague. But I did do that, and it was good enough for them to employ me in that part. And that's how I got that part. Again, you could say nepotism, except I did have to act my way into it. I did.
One thing always leads to another.
I had to actually do that one. I adored doing that film. Absolutely adored it.
So Star Wars, you were General Maximilian Veers, and then we talk about you, like you just mentioned, the James Bond or the Indiana Jones movie and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, working with Sir Sean Connery there, the previous James Bond, and like you said, you're Walter Donovan. And
I've known Sean for many, many years, since we were both starting out, actually. After I spoke to you about at the beginning, I spent 3 years at Stratford-on-Avon in the Shakespeare Memorial Company. And after that, almost immediately, the BBC did a very brave thing of one particular man's idea. It could never be done now, and no one would be brave enough to do it. He decided to present Shakespeare's history plays, the 6 plays, on television as a soap, 55-minute episodes of Shakespeare's history plays. It was called An Age of Kings. He got a lot of young actors together, and I was one of the very fortunate young actors, but they brought in people like Judi Dench, to play leading roles. And this chap came in to play the part that I wanted more than anything else. It's called Hotspur. I'm sure you know him. You've heard of him, but your viewers might like to. He's very Hotspur. He's very hot-headed, very funny, terrific character to play. And I so wanted the part, and I didn't get it. Because this young chap came down who I knew as a footballer at that time, called Sean Connery. And he played it, and of course was absolutely brilliant playing it. So I'd known him since then, which was the early 60s. So we knew each other, and we were really quite friendly. And so that helped enormously at the beginning of Indiana Jones.
Yeah. That had to be a lot of fun working with Sir Sean Connery on that movie. And your character is just awesome. You, again, played brilliantly by you. I mean, you're really, if you look at it like in For Your Eyes Only, you're trying to win Bond over to your side, but you're still the bad guy. And here you try to win Indiana Jones over to your side so you can get the better of him. I mean, it's just, you played it perfectly well. I don't think there's a scene in that movie that you're in where you could have done anything better. And again, your facial, like Tom mentioned earlier, because of probably your theater experience, live theater experience, your facial expressions are worth a million words. I mean, they're just awesome. And that's one of my favorite movies. And you really have contributed to that movie in a tremendous way.
So much. It is my favorite movie. I've been in getting on for 80 movies now, but right from student films to the big ones. And that was my favorite experience in any movie. And they paid me properly.
There you go.
That's always good.
Made a great deal of difference to my life.
How was Harrison Ford to work with?
Well, have you met Harrison?
No, we have not. No.
Well, he's another of nature's gentlemen. He's not a larky man, but he has a wonderful throw over the shoulder sense of humor. With completely straight face, and very rarely does the face break into a smile. It breaks into one of those little twitches at the corner of the mouth, and is very entertaining. He takes his time about letting you in, but when you are in, it's a very lovely time to be there. And of course, he works terribly hard. He gets everything bang on right at the very beginning of every scene. And he knows just what he wants to do, and he's very persuasive with his directors, even with Spielberg, who, of course, I'd worked with him before on the Indiana Jones. He was a charming companion, and very nice to have a meal with and be friendly with. And of course, he's a great carpenter, and I'm a carpenter too. So we have quite a lot to talk about.
Yeah. He went. One of my wife's friends. He's actually from around here, Harrison Ford. He went to high school with one of my wife's friends.
Really?
One of the suburbs here of Chicago.
How was he then? Was he popular then?
He was like the AV guy, rolling in the AV equipment and stuff. It's like, that's all I know.
He's a nice fellow. That whole film was a pleasure to make. We knew we were on a good one. The whole feeling on it from the beginning was amused and yet very serious at the same time, as you would expect with Spielberg. Spielberg was well, everybody knows this. I don't know why I'm saying it all again, but he can do everything on the set. He'd operate the camera more often than not, and he'd light it, and except act. He can't act. And so instead of so many directors who can't act behave very badly toward actors, he behaved very well towards us and allowed us a great freedom to improvise and things like that. There was one very good moment in that when the first time it's revealed that I am not the nice fellow that I've made out that I was, and I've got them prisoner, and they're back to back, the two boys tied together, and I'm sitting in a big chair, and they're having muttered conversations. Sean mutters to Harrison back to back, and they're talking about the girl.
Oh yeah, right, when they're tied up in chairs.
Yeah.
She's German, of course. How do you know? She talks in her sleep. Now,
Hey, that was a good.
talks in her sleep was absolutely made up on the spur of the moment.
Oh man,
We
That's a
all
great line.
fell about. I mean, you can imagine. Well, we thought, well, that won't be in the film, but no, Stephen kept that in. That was one of the best things in moments in the film.
That was a great ad lib.
You know the story in the first movie, the scene in the bazaar in Africa, in Morocco, when he's threatened by this bloke with a scimitar.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
Well, on that, do you know the story? Okay. They hired all these hundreds of people to be in this square with all these donkeys and camels and people and people selling things and all that. Very expensive day. And Harrison comes in that morning, having got the heebie-jeebie tummies, and he was feeling just absolutely dreadful. And he said to Stephen, "I can't do this." He's like, and Stephen said, "Look at all these people we've got here, Harrison. Well, we've got to move location tomorrow. We've got to get the scene today." So Harrison said, "Why don't I just shoot him?" Made in the movie. And that was the funniest moment.
Yeah, that's a great.
The swords came out, and he just went boom, and shot him dead. And that was one of the funniest moments in the film. And that was a sort of thing which Spielberg could recognize as being something very special. And
Well, and it's funny you say that, because when we talk about the James Bond movies, often you get the villains tend to have these really elaborate schemes for taking care of Bond, and it's like, just shoot him.
Exactly. In fact, they had rehearsed the scene as a scimitar fight,
Yes.
a two scimitar fight, each, and they'd rehearsed it.
Mm-hmm.
They got it really very good indeed. But you see what they couldn't do, and they had to move location.
Yeah.
So they did that. Boom.
Yeah.
Well, my wife and I saw that. We were in New York. Actually, we were publicizing the Bond film out in New York. We went to the movies in the afternoon and saw that film. I don't think I've laughed so much in my life as that particular moment. It was so unexpected. Because that's not the sort of thing that Indiana Jones does. He's a gentleman. Boom. Wonderful.
All right, I'm going to get back to Bond, because you have such talent, Julian, with accents and your facial expressions, as we mentioned, better than 1,000 words and so on. You seem so comfortable and at ease being a villain, which is hard to play. I mean, that's pretty cool. So, like in Your Eyes Only, when Bond and Melina are tied up together, and you're going to drag them through the water from your yacht, and you say, bind the wound. We don't want any blood in the water. Not yet. And then Melina says, murderer. And you say, you shot your last bolt, Miss Havelock. And then the last line you say, which was terrific, is like, oh, leave the legs free. They'll make appetizing bait. I mean, wow. Your face in every one of those deliveries of those lines, it's just so fantastic. And the delivery so on point. You just go, holy God, this guy is so evil.
Well, that was the scene I was talking about, which was the very first scene we shot, which was my audition day.
Bind that wound. We don't want any blood in the water. Not yet.
Murder.
You have shot your last bolt, Miss Havelock. Oh, leave the legs free. They'll make appetizing bait.
Well, I'm glad you liked them. Yes,
that was fantastic.
It was. You did the voice of Aragog in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and I know you've done some other voiceover work. How is it doing voiceover, and how's it different than acting on stage or in front of a camera?
Well, voiceover work is technical. You're in front of a microphone. If you're lucky, you get the picture in front of you, but often you don't. And I certainly didn't for Aragog. They got a lot of actors down there to, as it were, audition for Aragog. But the problem is that nobody knew what a spider sounds like when he talks. And
Just
so
you.
there were a lot of very eminent actors went up for it. And it just happened that what I did, I had to imagine a thing for Spider's voice. And it wasn't anything to do with the structure of a spider or his mandibles or anything like that. I just did a thing with the text that I had. And that happened to be the one that they thought, yeah, that will do for the voice.
You're Aragog, aren't you?
Yes. Hagrid has never sent men into our hollow before.
He's in trouble. Up at the school, there have been attacks. They think it's Hagrid. They think he opened the Chamber of Secrets, like before.
That's a lie. Hagrid never opened the Chamber of Secrets.
And it was very good for me because they kept on changing the text. And so I'd have to go back and re-record it. So I got about 5 different recording sessions money out of that.
That's 5 different paychecks, yeah.
Yeah. And also, very strangely, it's like everybody wanting Darth Vader's autograph when they're looking at a black plastic carapace. And I do a lot of these conventions, sci-fi conventions, and I sell as many Star Wars pictures, which I sell a lot of, as I do Aragog pictures.
Wow.
And it's a picture of a great spider. People want it. People want it. Not just not just kids either.
That's awesome.
Have you got one of Aragog? Yes.
That's pretty cool. You're making me laugh. That's like
when the films are done abroad, they're dubbed into other languages, of course, and it's not my voice at all. But they still seem to want my autograph when I go to these conventions. It is really weird.
It's a great story.
Also, I happen to be an arachnophobe myself. I'm absolutely terrified of spiders, and so me getting that part was quite an ironic thing.
That's great.
Fortunately ironic, but for the great arachnophobe to be playing a spider. Oh.
Yeah.
All right, Dan, let's go ahead and shift gears here and move in a little bit to the TV shows, because we mentioned The Saint. You were in The Avengers, Space 1999, Remington Steele, Merlin, Spies of Warsaw, and of course 31 episodes too with Game of Thrones. And so one of our other listeners, Eric Seabury, asked, what do you remember about working on the 2nd season episode, The Lawless Lady of The Saint?
Yeah. I can't remember either of them, frankly.
Okay. 1964.
Working. This is a terribly long time ago,
Yes, I understand.
I'm apologizing to your question on now, but I really don't remember the stories.
Okay, that's fine.
During that period, when I was doing all those series, all of them, all of them I did. I think there wasn't one single one I didn't do. I always played the same sort of character, this young bloke who was always the villain. And I got to the point where I'd say to directors, please don't employ me in this role because everybody will know that I did it. And it really did get like that. Yeah. Fortunately, I did play in a lot of them, but I do apologize to your question because I cannot remember anything about any of the stories of any of them, even the Remington Steele, which was very much a one-off because very unexpected because it only took place in this country because there was a very bad balance of payments thing going on between the two countries, and it was cheaper to make films in England at that particular period when they were in the middle of doing the Remington Steeles. So they did it one over here, and I got to be in that one. But even that one, I can't remember the story except for meeting Piers Brosnan, which has been a lasting pleasure for the rest of my life. But I do apologize to everybody.
That's fine. So I do have another question then about TV shows. Sylvester Stallone just made his first TV show, and he was quoted as saying it was beyond tough. It was brutal compared to filmmaking. So what are your thoughts on working on television versus film versus the stage?
Well, of course, I have to come out stage as being my favorite medium. It's what I came into the business to do. And what I've done for most of my life, and that's why I've been so lucky. I've been able to do so much theatre as well as these movies. That's why I've been so lucky. I can't any longer doing television. He's right; it was tough at that time because we did everything in every scene in about 3/4 of a second, and we had four. Maybe it was different in America. We had 4 cameras in the studio, and they took all the shots, and we had to avoid being in front of that camera when that camera was shooting, and all that was tough. Mind you, not as tough, I'm sure, as Mr. Stallone, who would have done 14 boxing matches and killed a few people. I didn't play those parts, so I didn't find it tough in that way. But they were much more concentrated because of the fact of there being 4 cameras all around you, and you had to be careful not to tread on the cables of the cameras. And there was always a microphone hovering here, which used to move around with you, which was a much more obvious microphone than the ones they have in film now. So it was tough in that way, but I don't see really much difference between that and real filming.
Okay.
You get the lines under your belt as quickly as possible, preferably beforehand. For some actors who come to the set, they don't know it. They haven't studied it. It drives me mad. It holds everybody up, and it's just such a bloody nuisance. There are some who like that, but most of them most actors come well prepared, and you do, I hope, what the director says and add a bit to it, and act it like anything else. But it's a much smaller, of course, experience than the theatre. In the theatre, you have to remember that there are people up there who need to hear you. Please, Julian, you don't have microphones in the theatre unless you're in a musical, I have to say. I've done a couple of those recently, and those are useful. When you think that all those musicals that used to happen in the 20s and 30s and 40s with no microphones, and those people would belt the stuff out, God, they were absolutely brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But I enjoy filming to a certain extent, because after you've finished every scene, there's a sort of sense of, done that. But on the other hand, you see it later and you think, I'd like to have had another go at that one. Why didn't I do so-and-so? Well, in the theatre, you can, as you play the run of a play, you can progress and add to it, and hopefully not take away from it, though that happens sometimes too in the theatre. You can add to it, build it, and make it more interesting, and which is why I feel so sorry for theatre critics who only go to first nights and never see it 3 months later when it's really good. You know what I mean? They very rarely go back. But when they do go back, those critics, they almost invariably say, this is a different show from the one I saw in the first time. Because the actors have been able to grow. And that's the thing I love. One of the things I love about acting to a live audience is that you can grow. You can experiment and grow.
Yeah.
Okay, so while we're talking about acting, I want to talk about acting with family members, because your beautiful wife of 54 years, Isla Blair, she played your wife in The Last Crusade, and she's also in the upcoming movie with you, The Reverend and Mrs. Simpson. And you and Isla joined your son Jamie in a stage production of Hamlet. So how is it working with your family? Are there tensions because of that, or is it easier?
It depends what it is. You know, Indiana Jones was a very, very brief appearance, and she did it because she said, I want to meet Mr. Spielberg and I want to meet Mr. Harrison. And she came and did that. Do you know the billing at the end of that, when the credits go? It's got Walter Donovan, Julian Glover, Mrs. Donovan, Mrs. Glover.
Mrs. Glover. Yes, I saw that. Yes.
The really most important one was the Hamlet.
Okay.
Which we were invited to play a family Hamlet up in the provinces in Norwich. So Jamie played Hamlet, of course, and Isla played the Queen, and I played not the king I played his real father as the ghost, but I directed it as well. So that meant I could concentrate on the directing. And we had a really good concentrated time rehearsing and performing that work. And one thing that happened, which is completely because we were a family, I have to explain to your viewers who may not know that there's a very big scene in Hamlet where he has a big argument with his mother about whether his mother should actually have married his father's brother. And it's a very, very hot scene indeed. And at one more moment, Hamlet is very rude to his mother. And at the very first rehearsal, when they still had the books in their hands, at that moment, he was so rude that my wife, Isla, slapped him crash across the face. And Jamie came straight back.
Wow.
Yes. And at that moment, the ghost came on. It was an extraordinary piece of... Now, that could never have happened if they hadn't known each other so well. You would never have done that with an actress you didn't know. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
With an actor you didn't know. It might come later, and the director might say, we might try, and you delicately put it to the actors and, oh, yeah, okay, let's have a go for that. That might happen, but at the first rehearsal, and that made that scene absolutely electric.
That's awesome.
That feeling was in it. And that was family, absolutely family.
That's fantastic. It has been some terrific insights and fun insights here, Julian. So let's get to your book, because your book is out, right? Q to Q. It's all about your career as an actor. And we want you to talk about that a little bit because it's full of gems with all of the things you have done in your life. So tell us about that.
The reason it's called Q to Q is because it's not an autobiography. I get very bored reading theatrical biographies, you know. And then I worked with Richard Harris, and then I worked with Laurence Olivier, and he was very nice to me, or whatever. I was asked to do this, saying, no, we don't want an autobiography. What we want is for you to remember 20 or so things that were really important in your career. And in fact, I've got it up to 28, I think it is now. And they start from my best performance ever, which is I hope, very funny. My worst performance, my first film, my latest film, the film that meant most to me, the stage play which I felt most engaged with and more heartfelt, etc., etc. And it's a selection of all those things. And that's why it's called Q to Q, not meaning queuing up, meaning the Q on the page.
It's a great title.
Yeah, that's
a book from an actor. That's an awesome title.
In a series of they're not chapters, they're episodes, and there's a curtain speech, as it were, at the end, and a front of curtain speech at the very beginning of it. So it's set in a theatrical context, but it's full of photographs. That's the point of it. But I call it I hope an entertaining lavatory book. Let's elevate that to the coffee table. It's not a great serious read. It's I hope interesting and entertaining for people who don't know much about the business, and give a little insight into what the life of an actor can be. And that's what I've concentrated on. We found some very interesting pictures which I didn't know existed, some which I did know exist, which fortunately I've kept. And I worked absolutely like that with the publisher, and he produced a better job of it than I thought we could ever make a job of it. And this is not me lauding it in order to sell it. It is absolutely the truth. It is a very, very satisfactory thing to pick up and look at and flick the pages and be amused by that, and hopefully moved by that, and whatever. Anyway, buy it. It's not very expensive, and I can recommend it.
Well, I love those kind of books for the pictures. Like you say.
If it wasn't me, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can recommend a film. The latest film I made was Tar, that amazing film with Cate Blanchett.
Yep.
You can say this is an amazing film without it having anything to do with you. This is And it's very rarely that you can say beforehand, or will say it beforehand, this is going to be fantastic. And I said that with Tar. And I did it with a musical I did in London, which is an American musical called the Scottsboro Boys, which is an absolutely candor and ebb.
That's a wonderful show. I love that show.
Saw it, did you?
Yeah.
Saw it in the States, did you?
I saw it on stage here in Chicago. Yes.
It's absolutely amazing, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And that one, I was one day into it, I was ringing all my friends to say this is going to be quite remarkable.
Yep.
Do come and see it. But normally you don't do that. You don't dare do it. But with my book, I can say I know it's entertaining. I know it's interesting. It's not going to knock your heads off. You're not going to say this is the greatest piece of literature ever or the greatest theatrical biography I've ever read. You're not going to do that. You're going to be very entertained. And if you've ever seen me before in the theatre or in the stage or television, you'll know my face. So have a look at it because it's very entertaining and inexpensive.
Very good.
And people can order that book at phantompublishing.co.uk, right?
Thank you.
And we'll have a link to that on our website.
We will put a link to that on our website, spymovienavigator.com, in the episode notes. So that you'll get a little, makes it easier for our listeners to go take a look at it. So again, that's
very good for me.
Phantom, Phantom, publishing.co.uk. So it's got to be a fun book because you're telling a unique perspective of the acting business, really, through every medium. That's
it. Yes, absolutely. I'll tell you my I'll tell you my best performance ever.
Okay,
go ahead.
It seems arrogant to say that at the top of the chapter, but this is it. When I did my military service, which we had to do in those days, I've done my initial training and I applied for officer training because I thought I want to sit in and have a nice room to myself. I don't want to have to be with other people all the time. So I want to be an officer. So I went for an officer training course, a 4-week course, which was quite rigorous. And there must have been about 40 of us, I suppose. And at the end of the time, I passed out last. I was so bad at it. I thought, oh, that's no good. Pass out last. What have I got to do anything? Because I got the chance of being relegated and do the next course. I thought, I know. I'm going to be an actor, aren't I? I must act the part of being an officer. So for the next couple of weeks, I bossed everybody about and told them what to do, and also organized. This is clever. Organized a little concert party at the end of our time, which took the rise out of all the officers. And you know how we all like the rise being taken out of us in public. Ho, ho, ho. And I did that, and I passed out top.
Very good.
That's my best performance ever.
I like the fact that you call that your best acting performance. That's great. Before we wrap, I just wanted to point out one other thing you were awarded. You have been awarded Commander of the Order of the British Empire in 2013. And so tell us a little bit about that, because to me, that's as an American, we don't really have much of that kind of stuff. So
don't you that? No, I know you don't. I got that while I was doing Scottsboro Boys, actually. Okay. Yes, which meant that at the party we gave afterwards, at a lovely restaurant, I couldn't have a drink because I had a show in the evening. Really annoying. You get these awards for all sorts of different things, and I hope that people like my work. But I think really that I got the award for the work that I do with young people. I do a great deal of work with young people in different drama schools and various acting academies or branches of a university, or simply a group of people who want to get together and make a film, and they want someone to help and who's been in the business for some time. I do a great deal of that. And I think that was the main reason that I got the Commander of the British Empire, which is a tremendous honor. It's the next one below knighthood.
Mhm.
And why aren't I a knight?
Exactly.
Coming.
Thought about that. Yes. Anyway, I'm pretty certain that's the reason I got it. And Prince Charles gave it to me, the award, who I happen to become quite friendly with, because he used to go to Stratford, still does, I think. He's a great Shakespeare freak, now King Charles. And we got to know each other then. And we visited him in his house in the country and things like that. And he gave me my commander. And as I knelt before him to receive it, he said, "Well, you've done it, Jules. You've done it," which was a very nice thing to get.
Yes, congratulations.
Fantastic. He's a fine man. He's a fine man.
Good.
Because he likes me. Any harm in
now
my
we
eye.
must be fine men too, because we love you.
Yeah.
I like it. Yep. Yes, the award system is a very much argued over one. A lot of people, very eminent people, won't accept awards. I mean, the great actor Paul Schofield, for instance, simply he was offered it 3 times, I think, and he wouldn't take it. Wow. And I understand that, but I'm too much of a peacock. I'm jolly proud that I got it, and I'm proud that people know that I got it. And
fantastic.
I'm quite. I took it as a serious compliment. Yes. I've only been able to wear it once, and it's a lovely badge. Really is a nice badge, but you've got to choose your occasion very carefully. Mm-hmm. You can't just go out to supper with it.
No. All right, that's a wrap. This has been fun, Julian. Thank you for joining us today, for all of your enlightening conversation. We really had a good time with you. Thank you.
Thanks very much for making it so easy.
Absolutely. And don't forget, get his book, Q to Q. Yep. And he's got a movie coming out in March, Pulcinella.
Yep.
So, good opportunities for you to see Julian.
You know everything.
Head to phantompublishing.co.uk to order his book. We've ordered ours already. It's on the way.
Yes. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Julian.
Thank you, Julian.
Thank you very much. You have been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been Dan
and Tom
of SpyMovieNavigator.com and our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. Please subscribe to our show through your favorite app and give us a 5-star review in your app, too. That helps keep the show going. Thank you for listening, because we truly appreciate you spending time with us.